June 22, 1941. The sky over eastern Poland was just beginning to lighten when the earth started to tremble. It wasn't thunder, but the roar of thousands of engines. Operation Barbarossa had begun. Columns of German panzers, half-tracks and motorcycles surged across the Bug River, a steel serpent winding its way into the Soviet Union. Colonel Hermann Balck, a veteran commander, watched the advance through his binoculars, a grim smile on his face. He, like every other German soldier, was absolutely convinced this would be another blitzkrieg, another lightning war. The mood was one of supreme confidence, bordering on outright arrogance. German commanders openly mocked the initial intelligence reports on Soviet armor. They scoffed at descriptions of tanks with crude welding and oddly sloped armor. Farm tractors, one officer joked over the radio, will send them back to the fields they came from. And for a while, it seemed they were right. The opening weeks of the invasion were a spectacular success for the Wehrmacht. Soviet forces, caught completely by surprise, retreated in disarray. Their BT-7 and T-26 tanks, relics of a bygone era, were no match for the German panzers. They burned by the thousands on the vast open steppe. Balck's division pushed forward relentlessly, sometimes covering 50 miles in a single day. The radio channels were filled with triumphant reports of breakthroughs and encirclements. Victory seemed not just possible, but inevitable. But then, something strange began to happen. Amid the reports of victory, other voices started to filter through the static, whispers from the frontline reconnaissance units. Stories of an encounter with a new, unfamiliar Soviet tank. "It's a monster," one scout reported, his voice shaky. "Our anti-tank guns, they do nothing." At first, these reports were dismissed. Nerves, battlefield exaggeration, a lucky shot. The German High Command laughed it off, but the whispers grew louder. A frantic message from a panzer commander crackled through the air. "Thick armor, no penetration. My shells, they're just bouncing off." The laughter in the command posts began to die down. As the first day of the invasion drew to a close, the setting sun cast long shadows over the battlefield, and in that eerie twilight, the silhouettes of wrecked and burning German panzers told a different story. Something was out there, something they hadn't planned for. The era of German invincibility was about to face its first real test. That test had a name, the T-34. The first encounters were chaotic and confusing. German tank crews, accustomed to being the apex predators of the battlefield, suddenly found themselves on the defensive. Their 37mm and 50mm guns, which had sliced through Polish and French armor with ease, were utterly ineffective against the T-34's revolutionary sloped armor. Shells would ricochet off its thick hide with a terrifying metallic screech, leaving behind little more than a scratch. Imagine the sheer panic of a Panzer III crew. They spot an enemy tank, a low-slung, aggressive-looking machine they've never seen before. They follow their training, load an armor-piercing round, take careful aim, and fire a direct hit. But instead of an explosion, they see their own tracer round harmlessly skipping off into the sky. They fire again and again. Nothing. Meanwhile, the Soviet behemoth keeps rumbling forward, its own powerful 76mm gun swinging towards them. For the first time, German tankers knew fear. This wasn't a farm tractor. This was a killer. One of the most famous early encounters occurred near the city of Razenia in Lithuania. A single KV-1 tank, the T-34's even bigger and more heavily armored cousin, held up the entire 6th Panzer Division for a full day. It parked itself in the middle of a key road, impervious to everything the Germans threw at it. They hit it with dozens of anti-tank shells. They called in 105mm artillery. Nothing worked. The KV-1 calmly sat there, picking off German tanks and supply trucks one by one. It was a psychological shock as much as a tactical one. The myth of German technological superiority, a cornerstone of their military doctrine, was shattered in a single afternoon. These new Soviet tanks, particularly the T-34, weren't just good. They were revolutionary. The secret was its design philosophy. While German engineers focused on complex, high-quality machines, Soviet designers prioritized what really mattered on the battlefield: a perfect balance of firepower, armor, and mobility. The T-34's sloped armor was a stroke of genius. It didn't just have to be thick. Its angle effectively increased the armor's thickness and made it far more likely to deflect incoming shells. This was a concept German designers hadn't fully embraced yet. Then there was its wide tracks. While German panzers often bogged down in the thick mud of the Russian Rasputitsa or the deep snow of winter, the T-34 could glide over the difficult terrain, giving it a crucial mobility advantage. And finally, its 76.2mm gun was powerful enough to knock out any German tank on the field at the time. It was simple to produce, rugged and perfectly suited for the brutal conditions of the Eastern Front. The Germans were stunned. Field Marshal von Kleist called it the finest tank in the world. The immediate problem for the soldiers on the ground was how to survive. How do you fight an enemy you can't seem to kill? The German tankers had to get creative and desperate. They learned that the only way to knock out a T-34 was to get dangerously close, flanking it to hit its weaker side or rear armor. This was incredibly risky, turning every engagement into a life-or-death gamble. They also relied on the superior training and tactical coordination of their crews. German tank crews operated like well-oiled machines, communicating effectively via radio to coordinate their attacks. Soviet tank crews, on the other hand, often lacked radios and had poorer tactical training, especially early in the war. This meant a group of panzers could sometimes work together to overwhelm a lone superior T-34 air support also became critical. The Stuka dive bombers, with their terrifying sirens, were one of the few weapons that could reliably destroy a T-34 from the air. But on the ground, it was a brutal close-quarters slugfest. The psychological impact on the German troops was profound. The confidence of June 1941 evaporated, replaced by a grim respect and even fear of their new adversary. Every time they crested a hill or entered a village, they had to wonder, is a T-34 lurking, waiting for us? The T-34 shock fundamentally changed the nature of the war on the Eastern Front. It ended the fantasy of a quick, easy victory and set the stage for 4 long, brutal years of attrition. The T-34 wasn't just a tank, it was a symbol of Soviet resilience and industrial might. While the Germans were building their complex, expensive Tigers, the Soviets were churning out thousands upon thousands of simple, effective T-34s. They could afford to lose them in battles of attrition because they could always make more. This sheer weight of numbers, combined with a tank that was more than a match for its opponents, would eventually overwhelm the Wehrmacht. The story of the T-34 is a powerful lesson in military history. It shows that the best weapon isn't always the most technologically advanced or the most perfectly engineered. Sometimes the winner is the one that is good enough, available in massive quantities, and perfectly suited to the environment in which it has to fight. It was a rude awakening for an army that believed itself invincible. A steel monster born from the factories of the Urals that helped turn the tide of the Second World War. The farm tractor had come back from the fields, and it was out for blood. Thank you so much for watching. The Eastern Front is full of these incredible stories of technological shocks and desperate battles. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into military history. And let me know in the comments below, what other legendary tanks would you like to see us cover next? The Panther, the Sherman. We love hearing your suggestions. Until next time, stay curious.